Hey everybody! Before we start today's episode, I would like to remind you that I recently started a gaming review channel. You can find the link to that channel in the description down below. It is labeled Konoha Reviews. On that channel, I review games, both old and new, and you can even request certain reviews by commenting on the videos on there. Please check it out, and if you like what you see, please consider subscribing and supporting me on that channel. Thanks, and enjoy the rest of the episode. With the devastating May Day attack having crippled the American People's Commonwealth and its governmental power, Chomsky struck down hard on any form of threat he could think of. The Red Menace, the Communist Party that until that time had free rein to exist in response to the fear that a revolutionary similar to that of Angela Davis's might erupt here as well. But times had changed, and Chomsky used the chaos at which his nation now stood to banish the Communist Party, even though the party had nothing to do with the initial attack. As the War of the Six Armies raged on in Libya, something very peculiar happened. Where many people initially had faith in Gaddafi silencing the revolution when there were only one or two revolting factions at hand, doubt set in when more and more of his armies separated to start a revolt of their own. But it seemed that the heart of Gaddafi's core and some of his best men, paired with their best equipment, had stayed and were able to create a lot of room for them and defend themselves against the rebel attacks. By August, Zhuganov continued to play his political campaign of securing his position as tightly as possible. The economic recovery plan would now win over the hearts of the common folk, and even some in overtaken nations in Central Europe, due to economic growth he wanted to implement there too. With the War of the Six Armies now continuing for over a month, it was clear that Gaddafi showcased his true power in that he reduced the ground claimed by the rebels on almost all sides. He created two clear fronts where more and more reinforcements were sent to. Gaddafi's wrath would know no bounds. Then sudden and terrible news struck the UK. Prime Minister David Owen and his deputy Shirley Williams were hunting on the outskirts of Greater London when their Secret Service became aware of a possible threat. According to local officers, a suspicious black sedan was parked at the fence line of these grounds, with its owner seemingly gone for hours up to that point. With the service in fact more than 100 meters away from the pair, it became clear to them that the two most powerful politicians in Britain could be the target of a possible assassination. The dispatch proceeded to run towards Owen and Williams, but they were too late. A camouflaged figure took two shots. One hit the Prime Minister, and the second barely missed Deputy PM Williams, piercing the hill just behind her. Before anyone could come to their senses, the assassin had disappeared, and Owen lay motionless at Shirley Williams' feet. To the horror of all British citizens, Royal London Hospital declared that afternoon that their beloved longtime leader had passed away. Britain as a whole was in shock as another politician in this world was assassinated, a quite common occurrence in the world today. Stability staggered, and in several towns and cities, riots broke out as people pointed fingers to certain factions or ideologies. For the time being, Shirley Williams would take over until matters had calmed down. Though the assassination sparked outrage and anger among some citizens, to others, it made them embrace their loved ones and closest around them in this grave time. With London's government crippled, it could mean a golden opportunity for others to rise to the top in either a blissful career move or by force. Britain was so focused on its own tragic events that the news of one of the six armies, the army of combined syndicates, was defeated went completely past most people's knowledge. Gaddafi continued to put on a display of absolute dominance and power. Angela Davis, on the other hand, showed confidence and dominance in a whole different way. She greenlit a new campaign, labeled the Female Recruitment Campaign. This meant that women were now allowed to serve in the UAPR, increasing its army size by 5%. But besides just building a bigger army potential, Davis also received more support as she herself was the embodiment of the strong female who rose to the top. Many women in the UPR looked up to her, and those who didn't were silenced. Chomsky had received very mixed reactions after his banishment of the Communist Party. But he wasn't done yet. He continued to now provoke the committee in making a wrong move, which he could use to his advantage. It was a very sly way of doing things, but if it worked, Chomsky would be able to rid himself of more potential threats. By September of 2010, the situation regarding the refugees coming to Italy had drastically changed compared to the open arms reception initially. Public outcry had continuously pushed for the president and his cabinet to declare a crisis in the Mediterranean and across Italy, with thousands of refugees approaching every fortnight. Until then, however, the administration had remained reluctant, with the European Union stating each time a significant event occurred on their coasts that these refugees must be permitted to stay in Italy no matter the costs. Instead of following the EU's orders, President Napolitano and high-profile figures of the Italian Communist Party hosted a press conference this morning with the intent of delivering an important statement to national media. In this statement, the party unanimously declared the current situation a crisis. And then on September 19th, an event occurred that would go down in history. In a scene never to have occurred in hundreds of years, Her Majesty barged into the House of Parliament, accompanied by Prince Charles, her security detail, and various members of the House of Lords. With her motive unknown, it was becoming increasingly clear that the Queen was making her way towards the very own House of Commons, deemed unofficially illegal by British political society since the 1600s. As she approached the doors, they were opened and she was allowed to enter, and the results were drastic. I hereby utilize my royal decree to dissolve this house at once. These closing words of a grand but brief speech followed by the Queen's message to Britain. According to her, the assassination of Prime Minister Owen by Soviet agents could prove that the UK was still not safe from the communist threat, and that they had to enact radical change to counter it. As news of this historic event reached the country and planet, reception was mixed. Some said she was restoring the glory of Britain as a sovereign state, while others claimed this was Britain's pathway to dictatorship. Though both France and Germany were still working in favor of their Soviet masters, currently they were not blatantly functioning as a copy regarding one another. But both were making aerial units, and while France had received the command to manufacture fighters for the Red Army, Germany provided the communists with bombers. The Kingdom of Spain, of course, was quite happy to hear the news of the royal coup that occurred in Britain. Juan Carlos was, for the moment, as he mostly was, occupied with altering infrastructure to make it better and more efficient. Meanwhile, Chomsky continued to issue influence on currently the Trade Council. Though the results of his actions could be proven negatively in the long run, it had very beneficial effects on a short-term scale. It benefited mostly industry rather than his political game, since he committed his attention to the latter during the past months. News then arrived from Africa once more, but not from Libya as one might expect. Worrying reports from several rural regions of Ethiopia had led to the national government requesting aid from the international community. Many had expected the administration to brush aside such reports, but it seemed they had taken a turn for the more humane and considerate. Currently, planes were flying to remote towns and villages to deliver vital supplies, including water as well as food. If this situation could calm down through the global community's help, then surely a disastrous famine could be avoided. Then on the 20th of September 2010, one day after the Queen barged in, news was publicly released that the Queen officially had assumed power. Since her dissolution of Parliament and establishment of absolute control for Her Majesty, she had still not officially become the autocrat she obviously intended to be. On that day, however, the de facto had become de jure, with Britain's provisional government officially stating Parliament was no more, and Her Majesty would rule unopposed by the traitorous Republicans. Obviously, this was not a big shock to the British people themselves, as many would still go about their daily lives. some being more apolitical than ever in these interesting times. But outside of the country, the reactions on this news were very, very different.